Hey folks, Tony here, and back to do a thread response to Bigstar1000's Fine Wine Thread. I'm sure as most of us know by now, this thread basically has to do with albums that get better with age. So maybe an album you picked up and you didn't really get into it when you first heard it, and you put it in your collection, and then a few years later or something, you pick it up again, revisit it, and you find you really like it. So for this, I decided, now there's a number of albums that would fall into this category for me, but I decided to stick with one. I'm just going to talk about one record, and it's an album that usually either love it or hate it. Big fans of this artist usually like this album, but normal people, casual fans, tend to hate it. It's an album that gets shit on quite a bit, and if you could hear it in the background, I'm talking about Neil Young's Trains. Okay, so obviously I'm a bit biased when it comes to Neil Young because, as you guys know, I'm a huge Neil Young fan. Have all his albums. I've seen the guy live like 16 or 17 times. I mean, I'm a huge Neil Young fanatic. But I must say, when I picked this album up, and I'd heard of it before I bought it. I didn't really hear the record. I've heard maybe little bits. I mean, this is really back before the internet was so prevalent. I'd heard of the album, but didn't really know what it was really all about. So I picked it up, and I have to say, like, I bought this CD. And it's interesting, this CD, it was never really put out in the United States on CD. This is an import from Germany. I probably bought this when I was about 16 or so. But, yeah, I was not digging it at all when I first got it. I was like, what is this, So, for those of you who don't know, this is Neil's, I want to say, 12th album, and studio album, and it's mostly an electronic album. It's really interesting because Neil had discovered this kind of, I forget the actual name of it, but it was like a big kind of synthesizer kind of thing where you could do all kinds of crazy things with sound and things like that. I forget the name of it though. So he discovered this big piece of equipment and was playing with that a lot. And he also discovered the vocoder. The vocoder is a piece of equipment that basically distorts your voice. It gives it all these different kinds of tones. Essentially, it makes it sound like a robot. Probably used mostly, if not only, in the 80s. So Neil basically sounds like a robot on this album, on most of the tracks, not all. It's an interesting concept. So to give this a little bit of historical context, I guess. So yeah, released in 1982. Some years before, a couple years before, Neil's second wife, Peggy, had given birth to his second son, Ben, who was born with severe cerebral palsy. A really, really bad case. He was quadriplegic. He couldn't speak. He was, severe handicaps. So before this, during the album before this, Reactor, Neil and his wife and his son, they enrolled him in this program. And I forget what it's called. I think they just refer to it as the program. So it's basically a program designed to teach kids with severe handicaps how to do simple tasks that a normal kid their age should be able to do easily. And it's done through repetition. So Neil has kind of said that this took up a huge part of their lives. Somebody always constantly had to be with the kid to teach them to crawl across the floor or to do these simple little tasks, and through constant repetition. And they said it was a really grueling thing, and if they didn't constantly do it, they'd be kicked out of the program. He said that they felt like they were kind of held prisoner. So when Neil Young and Crazy Horse recorded Reactor, Neil said he was really distracted, and a big thing on Reactor is repetition. There's a lot of repetition in the drums and in the rhythm. Just the whole thing is really kind of repetitious. If you're familiar with that record, you probably know what I mean. So Neil was on Reprise Records. That was his label. So David Geffen started his own label, Geffen Records, and David Geffen was Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young's manager. So when he started his label, they signed Neil Young, and as his first album, Neil he's got a big piece of property in Hawaii, so he goes to Hawaii pretty often. So while he was there, he recorded this album. It was to be called Island in the Sun, and it was basically an island-flavored rock album. And he handed that in to Geffen, and it was recorded while he was actually still on Reprise. So when he brought that album in, Island in the Sun, they basically rejected it, and they said, "Why don't you record some new material?" So Neil was so involved with all this new equipment that what he did was he recorded these songs and then fed them through this synthesizer piece of equipment, and what he got were basically the 6 or so songs on this album that are heavily electronic, have the vocoder on it, and it's a very, very strange record. It really is. What's also strange about it is that he took a few of those songs from Island in the Sun and put this on the record as well. So it opens, so, it's 1982, you buy this record, you take it home, and you put it on your turntable. The first song you hear is called A Little Thing Called Love, which is, like I said, an islandy kind of song. There's bongos in it. It's just if you heard the song, you know what I mean. And then, so that's somewhat normal, especially compared to what's coming. After that song now, you have the Computer Age. A totally electronic song. And you can't understand Neil. So getting back to his son, Ben, what Neil was going through, a statement that he wanted to make on this record, was about communication. It's really hard to understand the lyrics to what Neil's singing. It doesn't sound like Neil Young. And that was kind of the message he wanted to put across. His son Ben, he couldn't communicate. Actually, I want to read you a quote from Neil, basically on this. This is from Wikipedia. So this is an attempt to, reflection on communicating with his son. And he says, "At that time, I was simply trying to find a way to talk. He was simply trying to find a way to talk, to communicate with other people. And that's what trans is all about. And that's why on that record, I'm saying something, but you can't understand what it is." Well, that's exactly the same feeling that I was getting from my son. So it's kind of a heavy statement that he's making here. Some people thought it was kind of a joke when it came out, that it was basically poking fun at the direction that music was going in. You had bands like, Devo, Kraftwerk, things like that, heavy electronic things going on. But Neil was really, in an attempt to really kind of keep up with, the changing, musical landscape, he was also trying to make a statement about his son. And a lot of people don't really know that. So yeah, imagine too being David Geffen, and you just started your label, and you sign Neil Young, and the first thing that he brings to you is this record. It's a wonder that they actually accepted it and put it out, but part of his deal was complete artistic freedom, and as we all know, Neil really took advantage of that in the 80s while he was on Geffen. So they put this out, and then they told Neil, and then Neil actually went in a country direction and recorded the Old Ways material. Well, Geffen rejected that and said put out a rock and roll album. So then Neil recorded Everybody's Rockin', which is a rockabilly record, and then they put out Old Ways. But yeah, it's really interesting. I really, really love this album. As I said when I bought it, was not into it at all. I'm like, what is this, It was probably like 2 years ago that I really revisited this. I think I took the CD, I put it on my iPod, and really listened to it a number of times, and really, I love this record. I really, really do. The songs on it are actually really strong. The melodies are really strong. I mean, yes, they're put through this equipment, and it sounds all electronic, but the songs are they're really good. Transformer Man, if you could hear that in the background, is, the song is basically about his son, if you read the lyrics. It's a beautiful song. He did it on Unplugged in the 90s without all the electronic, without the vocoder, and it's an excellent song. But yeah, you have a couple of those island flavored songs, a little thing called Love, Hold On To Your Love, and also Like an Inca. Like an Inca closes this, and it's not electronic at all. Basically, if you know the song The Hitchhiker from Illinois, The Hitchhiker was written first. And I think Neil probably thought, it's too personal, it's too incriminating. He's basically doing a list of all the drugs that he's done in his life. And he rewrote it, he reworked it, and made it into Like an Inca. And on The Hitchhiker, there is still a verse of Like an Inca on that. But yeah, really strong record, I have to say. He also does a version of Mr. Soul from his Buffalo Springfield days, and it's given the electronic treatment. This is Mr. Soul. Yeah, so I have 2 copies of this. I have an original here, first press. The first pressing is listed as the second track, If You've Got Love. It's not on the record, so they put a sticker on it as a disclaimer, if you could see that. And yeah, it was supposed to be, and Neil changed his mind, so it's not on it. Some people think that Neil should have taken just the electronic material and made an EP of 6 songs and put it out that way, just because it's such an odd thing having those 2 very different styles on the one record. But it's still an excellent album, and he's got great players on it too. I mean, basically Crazy Horse, but also Niels Lofgren, Ben Keith, and Bruce Palmer, who played with him in the Buffalo Springfield. Yeah, fantastic record. If you've listened to this and just dismissed it, I recommend you go back and check it out again. If you've never heard it, I recommend checking it out. You may not like it, and that's fine too. It's not for everybody, but I happen to really, really like this album. It's a really cool record. So there you go, guys. Hopefully this wasn't too rambling. Maybe you learned something. Derek's thread, I'm really trying to think about what to say there, but I am kind of working on it. Also, it's probably going to be a little while, yeah. I'm thinking another week maybe for my next vinyl update. But I promise you it's going to be probably one of my best, if not my best, and it's going to be a lot of stuff. A lot more stuff than I initially thought. But so yeah, look forward to that, and please leave me some comments, and take care, everybody. Yeah, it's Trans. Check it out. Have a good one.